everyone, welcome to another edition of VAFA Tragics, a special edition for you tonight. Of course, no VAFA footy on the weekend, which will come up later in the show, so stick around for that in the Tragic Take. But we do welcome on board for this evening's show a very special guest, the departing CEO of the VAFA, Michael Sholly. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for the invitation, and looking forward to a good show today, summarising our spectacular 12-year career at the VAFA.
Nick Armistead is here, as he is always. You've done a sterling job this year, Nick, can I just say.
Thank you, Andrew. It's great to
shuffling,
have you back.
shuffling around on the desk.
No, I enjoy it, but I do love you in that seat.
We'll get into the show. Michael, we want to come in. It's a bit of a celebration of the past 12 years for you, but we'll touch on the pressing issues for the VAFA for the future. Of course, if you've missed the news during the week, the VAFA announced that Brett Connell will take over as CEO commencing in July. Of course, Brett spent time at the VAFA more than a decade ago, I think it is, and has recently been at AFL Victoria working through their country program. So welcome on board, Brett. I'm sure we'll catch up with him on the Tragics in the coming months when he takes up the position. But Michael, firstly on to you. We wanted to touch on a couple of your top fives in various elements of the things. But can I start off by asking, when you first joined the VAFA, late 2005, early 2006?
Correct. It was around Christmas time, so basically had a week or two before Christmas, and then we started full on in early January.
So you would have been through the process, and they would have said, what's the biggest challenge facing the VAFA? So what was it back then?
I think, like most of the times, it's financial, and at that time we needed to make more money to ensure the longevity or that the competition was able to continue, which obviously it was able to, but we needed to be financially secure without making sure that the costs for clubs weren't too prohibitive, especially because we had such a, and still do have such a range of clubs. We had to get our financials in order, which we were able to achieve. So I think initially that was probably the main driver to get the organisation financially secure.
Could you have ever envisaged 10 straight surpluses? Talking about that.
Oh, thank you. Well, I didn't. Well, you don't plan to have 10 straight surpluses, but we had to go from being an organisation that was true to the non-for-profit, meaning let's not make a profit, and so you had to change the idea around to let's make a profit. And it wasn't necessarily a profit, it's a surplus, it doesn't go anywhere. But we had to change the thinking of the board to ensure that we, of our total revenue, we had to aim for 5-10% surplus to ensure that we could keep on going. And that meant if there was a catastrophe of any sort, we could make sure the staff were getting paid, other people were able to, that the competition was able to continue. So we went from an organisation that was probably, it was still sound. We weren't losing money, but there was no cash. There was no cash in the bank. There was not enough probably funds there to secure us in case there was an issue.
Well, we've got over the dry stuff, the financials first of all. We'll move on to some of the more fun stuff. There's been a lot of initiatives that have. Can you list your top five? So we talk about the Island Tour, the introduction of women's football last year. Elsternwick Park redevelopment's been announced. The renaming of the sections is an interesting one. I want to get your thoughts on. The Premier Grand Final moving to Princes Park.
Yes.
Changing staff dynamics in the thirds competition's been introduced, all in your time. How do you rank your top five?
Well, probably best that a bit difficult to sort of rank them because when you talk about them, the areas of their importance sort of change according to what scenario you're in.
I think put your neck on the line and rank your top five.
All right. Well, without doubt, number one for me would be women's football. It's changed the whole identity of the competition. If ever there was. The thing about the VAFA is that we're a lot more progressive than what is understood in the environment out there. Some people think it's an old men's society, and I think just showing what we've done in women's football this year has shown that we're not just men. We are people who are prepared to make change for the better, and we're prepared to take a bit of a risk to make sure it comes off if it's the right thing to do.
Could it have happened earlier?
Probably could have, but the organisation, as in the clubs, weren't ready for it. Some of the clubs may have been, but it needed certain organisations to be in line with us. And even though we tried to get it off the ground 3 years ago, it was a very slow burn because there just wasn't the impetus at that time. The whole thing, I think, changed not only with AFL women's, but just women's sport in general. When the rugby side played so well at the Olympics at Brazil, they were just sort of changing. You'd feel a momentum, and it probably It may have even started with Michelle Payne winning the Melbourne Cup. There were sort of things that were happening, and you could see there was a little bit of a progression towards making women more available to play sport, and that occurred. And the best thing that we had is that we had clubs who came on board. The competition in itself, the VAFA didn't do it. The 40 clubs who are represented, they're the ones who deserve all the credit. And they're the ones who actually did it. They're the ones who recruited the players, spoke to council, got the grounds. And, what we have, though, and that's the whole strength of our competition, is that we have great clubs and great people leading our clubs.
How big can it get? We've said we've got 40 teams. How big can it get?
Oh, it'll get to 100 teams. Pretty quickly. I'd say, look, it's at the moment we've got 40 in 1 year. I'd be staggered if it didn't get to over 60 for next year. And then how it grows from then will probably be a little bit, year by year. But certainly, I think there'll be a minimum of 20 next year. It's similar to the AFL. Once people have seen how successful it is, well, why wouldn't you have a team? We've got 75 clubs. Why wouldn't you? The only reason why you wouldn't was because you mightn't have the resources or capability. But you're not going to, if you're sitting at a committee meeting and you're saying, we're not going to have a women's team, well, you're the ones who are going to suffer.
So women's football's number one.
That's number one.
Number two?
I think when I first came in, Elstonby Park was always, just such a huge issue. And whilst it mightn't have the greatest profile at Sports Cover Arena at times, it is an absolute must for us. We have 400 umpires who train irregularly, but on some Thursday nights we have 200 people training, so it's a huge club and they need a venue. Sports Cover Arena provides that for us and also allows us to have a football ground to be played on in finals. They're the two key elements. Year by year, the scarcity of grounds for finals makes it extremely difficult. And not only that, we're introducing another 60 women's teams, 5 competitions of women's finals this year, and Sports Cover Arena is where they're going to be playing. So I think that people underestimate that. And when we build administration offices, brand new facilities, have a whole new sporting ground there, slightly smaller than what it is now, or skinnier, with a brand new playing surface that'll be as good as any in the state, I think people will be delighted to be able to play.
Will the cricket wickets be removed?
Well, the practice wickets are going, and there's not as many cricket pitches. But, we still have to accommodate cricket, obviously. So I'd say they're the two that I think are going to be around the competition for the next 20 and 30 years, forever. The other ones that I like, I really enjoyed the thirds competition. I think that participation is a massive importance for the VAFA. So the transition from junior to a senior player at a footy club is critical. And if you can keep those players at your club by having a third 18, then I think that that's been a real benefit to a lot of clubs. It's stabilised their reserves and it's added another dimension to their club by having more participants.
We'll get on to the future of those competitions later in the show. So the thirds introduction, changing the names, was also a controversial one of the sections, moving away from the lettered system of A to E and F?
Well, yeah, there was always, the reason why I just wanted, because we brought in a thirds competition, I wanted to get it aligned with Premier cricket that was being played at the time, where they had Premier seconds and Premier thirds. And to play Premier thirds in cricket was a pretty good standard. Like, it wasn't looked down upon. So I just wanted to make sure that the thirds competition had a bit of prominence. So to be called Premier thirds was a much better title for them than A section thirds. And we also had some issues with our division clubs when they were speaking to councils, that we wanted our lower divisions to have a prominent name up against the metropolitan leagues. So to call our D grade competition Division 1 made it in alignment with the Division 1 metropolitan leagues. So I thought it made a lot of sense, and I think it's been a really good move from as Premier competition. It's given it a new lease of life in a way.
How important was it then to hire full-time staff? I know Andrew being previous media, myself, and obviously Blair O'Hara in commercial. How do you see that and rank that as important?
Well, as I said when I'm speaking to you, Nick, it's the most important. Again, the development of the league, like this show and all of our media have won awards through AFL Victoria. We are the best in what we've done in this, and we've been able to get good people who've been able to be imaginative and have creative shows, and that's been successful, just similar to our competition. The vibrancy of our competition is only measured really by the engagement of our players. And I thought previously it was, the engagement was a lot about administrators. So by having you has enabled the players to become much more involved in the competition, and they've had a lot more say. They've had a lot more discussion points. We've got a new players association now, and I think that's the result of getting younger people on the camera and in front of the general audience of the VAFA. So that to me is that's in the top 5.
Excellent. Yeah, that's good to hear.
Where are we at? 4 or 5?
Well, I don't know where we're at. We might. We've got Big V Club that was introduced as well. We've had the Woodrow Medal night. Other little ones that came about under the time that you've been at the helm. Introduction of green and for the umpires, wearing green on the field as moving away from their white uniforms, which I know the umpires would have put their hand up and doing. But and also clash strips for most clubs now.
Yes. I thank you for doing all them there. They are very innovative. Now certainly the presentation night that we had was probably just got a little bit long and tedious, having to go through all the sections, and being able to do them on a radio, which you do, which both of you have done, but then to highlight our Woodrow Medal and our Premier was made it a great event. At the moment, we still have about 250 who go to that event, and I still think it's got room to grow. And I think it'll grow when the women's have theirs. So the women's will have one there this year, a similar one, where they'll have their Premier section and they'll read out all the votes for them. And maybe in time that might merge to make another big event of the 2 Premier events, but that's in the future.
In terms of the Premier Grand Final going to Princes Park, it's had a couple of years there.
Yes.
What's obviously a fantastic first year, great success with the crowd numbers, and the Grand Final's sensational. Last year also a success. What's the future hold? If Elsternwick Park's redeveloped, do we go back to Elsternwick Park? Do you think that's the right move?
You always want the competition's best match to be played at a venue that is befitting that match. I think in the 1980s and 1990s, I suppose, when the ground was the peak ground in the competition, most of the competition were playing in parks, from North Isle boys playing at Brens, Old Zavs were in the park. They weren't playing at stadiums. And when the VAFA collapsed, it meant a lot of our grounds became available, and our clubs then expanded into those grounds. So therefore, Sports Cover Arena probably didn't have the same kudos as what it did in years ago. So for me, I would say that it'd have to reach a standard that's better than what the clubs are playing on at the moment. If it's able to get to that standard, then I think it should host it. If it's unable to, and it has to go to a VFL ground, then I wouldn't say that you shouldn't do it, because we want our players playing at the best possible venue to produce the best possible game. And to me, the best grand final we've had since I've been there has been at Princes Park. When we played St Bernard's and Old Trinity, not only was it a great game through competitiveness and the support of the crowd, but I think it was the first time that the talent of the players were exposed. Previously there were some issues with either the ground, the cricket pitch, the wind, whereas this game was a pure match played on a beautiful surface at a VFL ground, fully enclosed stadium, and our players put on a great show. And to me, that's been the best grand final that we've had.
On that note, we'll take a quick break. We've got through some of the big initiatives of Michael Shelley. We've still got the Big V to discuss, some of the big wins, the best players he's seen, the best premiership side he's seen over the journey, and what the VAFA future holds. We'll be back with more Tragics right after this.
Anytime is the right time to get fit at Anytime Fitness. Access over 400 gyms across the country 24/7 and discover why more Australians train at Anytime Fitness than any other gym. Go online and register now for your free 7-day pass and feel something better.
Welcome back to the Tragics. We've got our special guest, departing CEO Michael Shelley, with us in the studio this evening. We're grilling him on the last 12 years of your stewardship of the VAFA. We've spoken about some of your big initiatives and big moves, but the Big V is a big part of the VAFA, and there's been some sensational wins over that journey. Can you pluck out a few that stick in your memory?
Certainly. Probably the biggest one we had was when the Eastern Footy League were trying to convince us to play a match for my first few years in my tenureship. And unfortunately, we always played the AFC team. So we played South Australian Amateurs, West Australian Amateurs. So I kept on knocking them back. However, there was a major event in early 2009 where there was a huge bushfires. And to raise money for the people in the area, which were a number from the Eastern Footy League, we decided we'd play a game. So it was all holds barred. We went to the game. We played it out at Ringwood. And it was a game where there was just boasting rights, nothing much else, but there was a lot of pride on the line.
Pre-season game.
Pre-season, it was very hot. It was a hot day. Dean Anderson was coaching, and we got a couple of players in there who just left the AFL, who we managed to secure a clearance for. And anyway, the game was played, and it was a highlight. It was a great standard match. And it got down to the last couple of minutes where the scores were just about tied, and needed a player to stand up. And a new player who just came into the competition from Western Bulldogs, Matt Robbins, took 2 hangers in the goal square, kicked the 2 goals, the siren rang, we won by 6 points, and it made everyone very, very happy. So that was a good start to our little rep program for him.
Is that the best individual performance you've seen from Matty Robbins?
There's just always little things that win games. You know, and probably if you say to me who have been the best rep players, I'd say Cameron Howard for his longevity. Matty Handley's been a great player. Brendan Yetzi. But there were just little patches where a player who is really good wins you the game.
Yep.
And you just need to have them in your team. I remember the 2011 or 13 game, whichever one it was. I think it was 2011 up in Shepparton. We were playing in freezing cold. You're only going to win the game with 6 or 7 goals. But the 2 things that stood out to me is the country have always got a gun goal kicker, the 150 guy goal kicker from wherever he's from. And Trent Zimbax was getting sliced in the first half. And I thought, mate, he can't possibly bounce back from getting, a bit of a towel up. And he just stopped this guy in the second half. And his colleague at the other end, Nick Sauntner, who had come back from the VFA and was a larger-than-life figure, he just kicked 2 goals in the last 5 minutes again, similar to what Robbins did, but no one else could do it. He was on the boundary line and did a little hook and probably twirled the ball a little bit, told everyone about it, and then just went and did it again. And so at both ends of the ground, those little highlights where blokes are able to just go on, grab the game by the scruff of the neck and win it. And, I think those 2 were able to do it. And we had a fantastic couple of games also against the country in EFL. The third time we played the EFL was in the Metro Champs, and we were playing at Princess Park. Again, we'd beaten them another time when we went down to Bayswater and played them, and we got through that one. So then we played this one at Princess Park.
For the Metro Championship.
For the Metro Championship.
The Metro year.
Yeah, so, this, the whole of Victoria is watching in this one rather than just the eastern suburbs. And Goss kicked 5 goals and was incredibly good, I thought, that day, and we won the game. We beat them pretty easily. I'm not sure.
46 points.
46 points, and Murphy Ambrose played.
Footage on the screen, yeah.
Yeah, that was a ripper. that was another one. You always like to win, People always, during the game, let's give this guy a game. He's been a good amateur servant, and I'd rather win. Like when you're playing a game, let's get out there and win. And I want to win in a couple of weeks' time when we play AFL Vic at Frankston. We've got to win that game.
What are our
got to get a cup.
What are our chances looking at the squad at the moment?
Yeah, well, it's like we always produce a good squad, just like pre-season training's always looking good for most people. So you produce a good squad in June the 1st. It's who turns up on June the 10th, and you're not going to win the game unless people commit. And if they commit, and you've got to get a couple of special players, somebody who's going to take you to over the line. Because if it's competitive, we're not going to walk over there and play AFL Victoria Country against 33 leagues and just go and give them a shellacking. The game, if we're going to win, is going to come down to wanting to. It's going to come down to the last few minutes and who can win it.
You mentioned some great players there that have played VAFA football.
Who'd I go with?
Yeah, well, can you stand up with any of the other ones? They're the ones that have played rep footy.
But there were Bentic, and I didn't see a lot of football as much as what coaches do, who are watching the games in and out. I spread myself out and doing duties. So it's not like, I'm focusing on footy the whole time. But I think Cameron Howard was an outstanding player. I think it's been him and Bentic. And I think Ross Young shared the medal, and I think in that year the 3 of them finished within 1 vote.
Yep.
And they were the 3 people for a period of time that were dominant players. For me, the best old Zavs player was Tim Ockleshaw. I thought he was an outstanding player. In those early times when I was at the helm. There were people who came in and out of the competition who might have only had a year or so, who were, excellent players. I thought Chad Jones from St Bernard's was a really good player. Paul Corrigan, who played at Old Haileybury, was an excellent player. Even Jenke, who won the medal, was rucked that year in 2006. He was obviously a really good player with Carl Steinfort. So we've had a lot of good players. Robert Harvey wasn't bad either. So we've had a
handy for Haileybury there.
Yeah, but the players who've been there for the journey, Jack Watts had a 10-year career with Brendan Yetzi, Matty Handley. All those guys have basically played that whole time. And Matty Handley probably played 10 years straight of rep footy from under 23s all the way through.
He's a star of the competition, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Still doing great things at Old As. We've got to keep moving. We want to get on to some of the more funnier moments. There are some that stand out. Nico, there's one that's caught your eye when we were looking through the list.
This one did catch my eye. So has anything during your tenure, a 12.5-year tenure, caused more headaches to you than in 2009 when Paran Assumption's Club 18 side hired a stripper pre-game, and this is a quote, to G up the boys?
Well, I thought when I first got it, I got a phone call on a Sunday afternoon from a junior journalist at the Herald Sun, and I thought, it's only going to be one of those little paragraph things. So I didn't take too much noting of it. I mean, I obviously, just said the political thing straight up and down, got one quote, and I thought, it'll be in the paper tomorrow, page 27. Got up the next morning, and front page on the Herald Sun, and I'm driving my kids to school because I got to rush. I didn't know this was going to happen. I'm driving there, and all the radio stations on the FM dial, they're all just taking the mickey out of me and out of the competition and the ammos and girls trippers, and that was a funny scenario when you're in there and you're in your car with your kids talking about Strippergate, and the kids they were slightly amused. But then it got a little bit serious when it actually became a really serious event. So we had to make a statement, and we had, when we brought Paran in on the Tuesday night, we had all of the news broadcasts all outside the ground or on the hill outside the ground, peering into our into the
meeting,
floor,
yeah.
into the meeting with the Paran guys all there, and we were having to tell them, just be serious here, don't laugh, make sure you're serious the whole time, the cameras are on. So we couldn't afford to have any sort of, and I had to come out and make a press statement. But it was, I think it must have been a slow news day. That was quite amusing.
Woodrow Medal count a couple of years ago wasn't a
Yes.
great moment.
No.
But it turned out to be great. Two great winners.
It did,
Fine.
shared the
Good
winner.
lads.
That was excellent. Well, look, we were going through a bit of an issue at the VAFA at the time where we had one great worker called Andrew Leonard had departed and he had a junior apprentice called Nick Amistad. And so when the votes were being done,
Yep.
Nick unfortunately didn't have a total handle on all of the players.
Talk about throwing under the bus.
Under the bus.
So, no, I mean, in an electronic system like it was, it became pretty difficult in those first few years because our technology didn't align with the AFL's, and the AFL's company refused to give us the passwords or whatever. So
access to integrate.
integrate, and it was a pretty difficult scenario. But we got there in the end, and it was a great, as I said, dual wins, Adam Bentig and Ross Young, and Cam Howard missed out by a vote, probably three of our best players.
Something a little bit more uplifting than that era must have been the Ajax kick for a car, Premier B Grand Final 2 years ago.
There are some things that just you get excited about. I don't know. I was just standing there and I got stuck in a Blair because they were kicking from the south to the north. And when you know Alston Park, if there's any little bit of a zephyr, it goes from the north to the south. And I said to Blair, why don't you give these blokes a chance? Let them kick with the breeze. At least they're going to make it. Yeah. So the first few kicks didn't make it. Then out of the blue, he must have just... it was a fantastic kick.
Adam Kaplan, Ajax.
Yeah, he kicked it, but I was standing right next to it, and I could see it, and it sort of had the right trajectory, and it just went up, and it was like it floated into the, because it had to stay in there too.
Yeah.
It couldn't bounce out, so it just sort of floated into the back of this car.
Here it is again. Let's just have a quick look at it.
His second kick. So he's had a bit of a sight on it already. Let's see how he goes with his second kick. That's a good kick. That's online. And it's in! It's in! We've got a car!
Oh, that was fantastic.
And listen to that commentary and that reaction from Michael Shelley.
I loved it. Loved it. Brand new car.
Sensational stuff. Michael, it's been really good to have you on board for the show. Do you have a view on where the VAFA should be in the next 5 or 10 years at all?
Oh, well, I think that the women's competition is every club go and get one. If you can't, try your best to have one. A brand new ground at Alston Park, a highlight feature of our grand finals, not only just our premier, but all the way down. If we can keep securing that ground at Sandringham, it'll be perfect. We've got events that surround it. So the biggest, I think, change that can occur is giving the players more license to run events and more say in the competition, because next year we'll have about 12,000 if these girls' numbers keep on continuing. That's who we're doing it for. It's a big organisation, but I think the players need to be cared for or given more opportunities to express themselves. So that's why we love rep footy. We love taking them to Ireland. We love these events that we're having. I think it's all onwards and upwards. So I wish Brett Connell the best of luck.
Good on you. Well, Michael, it's been great to
Thank
have you on board for the show. Congratulations. Good luck with your projects. What are you doing?
Thank you. Not sure yet.
Not
No,
sure?
no. Going on holiday.
Playing a bit of golf, I imagine.
Going on holiday first.
Exactly right. Michael
Thank you.
Sholly's been our special guest tonight on VAFA Tragics. Hope you've enjoyed a bit of a look back over the past 12 years of his time at the VAFA. We'll be back with normal programming next week, talking all things VAFA as we get into the second half of the season, round 9. Nick, thanks again for tonight.
Thank you, Andrew, and obviously big thank you to Michael for
Oh,
coming
it's
in,
always a
taking the
pleasure.
time.
Thank you, Nicholas. Sorry for that comment there
Good
before.
on you,
No.
Michael.
Good on you,
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be stick around. The Tragic Take's coming up right after this. Back with more in a moment. So this week's Tragic Take takes a look at the weekend just gone, the Queen's Birthday weekend. For so many years, it's been the home of rep footy, the opening weekend of rep footy for the VAFA, and this year we had none. What's going on, VAFA? We miss our games. The under-23 competition doesn't seem to exist anymore. That's okay, because certain teams and states don't want to play under-23s football. That's okay, we can handle that. But last year we had a senior game against the South Australian Amateurs, and that was great. It was fantastic to have that interstate rivalry back. What's happened this year? Look, I know the players probably enjoying their first weekend off for the season. Besides the Easter break, they get so many breaks in the VAFA. But the first weekend off in the year, all enjoying it, but we all want to see some rep footy. We love the rep footy program. We want to see it back on the agenda next year. So Brett Connell, your first task is line up a rep footy game for next year on the Queen's Birthday weekend. That's the Tragic Take this week.